Okay, welcome to join today's Velero meeting. Uh, First of all, for the overall status for Wave 1.14, we have created the RC1, and after that, we have run and some manual tasks for the issue fixes. And we will create another RC3, RC2 very soon. That's it. And for Wave 1.14, we have started the requirement collection, and we have created a issue tag. I mean the candidate issue tag for 1.15, and there is already some issues have been added. That's for the overall status. And myself is working on the data more microservice design PR and have follow up some comments and discussions. And also we have some local discussion. And I feel this design has been reached to the to for the critical point has been reached to the final decision. So we may be able to merge the PR very soon. So I make the last call for everyone to review the PR and to see if we have some further uh, uh, comments or not. That's it. And Daniel, please. Okay. Xin, please.
Hey,
Okay.
yeah. Just this week I fixed an issue Xun found when verifying RC1, and I'm preparing for RC2 and planning for the timelines for version uh 1.15. I think I'm gonna share the timelines, the proposed timelines later, uh, probably next week's company meeting. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Xin, please.
I'm working on the manually test and the netley test on 1.14 RC1 and verifying the check-in fix. That's all from my side.
Okay. Thanks. And Tiger, please.
Hello. So I added the request for retrying patching backup restore status. So for some context, this is we saw some customers had backups and restore stuck in progress when the backup is finished and the status is in progress, it try to patch to finalize or complete. And if it fails, the backup will just be stuck in progress status forever. So this patch is for that. Please let me know if you have any feedback. And,
Yeah. I just have a quick question regarding the issue. Why is there a status update is particularly error prone? I mean, we do a lot of API calls.
So,
I'm not sure. Do we want to retry every call if we
yeah.
do not? Yeah.
So my take on this was it wasn't that any one status update was more error prone than the rest. It's just the problem was certain status updates, specifically around the phase changes, like in progress to finalizing or finalizing to complete, because our controllers only run once over an in progress backup and a finalizing backup. If that status update fails, then it will never be revisited because the reconciler will never re-reconcile an in progress backup. So this is really a workaround because of the fact that our controllers will only take an in progress or a finalizing backup or restore once. They process it and then it moves on, because those controllers only pick things that are new or ready for finalize. So it's not that the status up the API call here is more error prone. It's that it will never recover from the error if we fail once and don't retry. Whereas the rest of the cases, for example, if we're doing validation, or if we're going to log the error and move on, or in some cases we'll, like, if we're waiting for plugin for operations, that controller re-reconciles every 10 seconds. So if we fail now, it'll re-reconcile next time and try again. So this was really to deal with the fact that once you have this backup that's stuck in progress because it failed to update the status, it'll be in progress forever. We'll never re-reconcile that. And that's very confusing to users because they think the backups are still running and taking forever, but they actually didn't. They failed, but we didn't update the status.
Let's see, so
And
how
the
about-
specific customer use case that ran into this, they have a situation where when they do kind of cert rollout, where it takes about 2 minutes, where during this process, the API server calls fail, and then 2 minutes later, or within like a minute or two later, they'll start succeeding again. So, for example, restore makes a whole bunch of API call because everything we create, we restore. I think that's fine because we'll just fail some items and then they'll get failed message. They'll have to rerun it again because we don't get stuck forever in this state. And my concern about retrying every call is if something else happens, it's not a temporary problem. The API server is failing on a more permanent
Right.
basis.
Right.
We're going to time out for every single item in the restore. There might be 2,000 items in the store and it's going to take days. So that's why I'm thinking it's just this Velero CR status updates that we should be retrying on.
Yeah, but the case you mentioned is really rare, right?
It's not rare for the customers that hit it. I mean, they're hitting this regularly because they have this process that happens every day that takes a couple of minutes. And if you have a bunch of, if you happen to be finishing a backup or restore at that time, when you have a 2-minute window and you have multiple backups are running every day, they see this with some regularity. And I think the bigger point is not only is it not necessarily rare for those environments where it happens, it's that if we just failed the backup and moved on, that'd be fine. But we can't fail the backup because we can't update the backup, and so we get this backup in this this invalid state. It's in progress, but it's not really in progress anymore, and it just stays that way forever. Velero has no way of recovering from this in the current code base.
So in general, it seems like we should retry for, every CR at least when they're doing phase transition from
I
into
think every CR phase transition does make sense. Another place where I don't necessarily think we want to retry is when we do the progress updates mid backup, mid restore, because if one fails, we get to we'll succeed on the next one. I think that's fine. My concern about retrying too many things is that for this 2 minutes failure case, it's temporary. We're fine because it only happens for 2 minutes. But we also don't want to run into situations where you have a cluster where the API server is, has a misconfiguration or something wrong with it that's not going to self-recover. We don't want a backup or a restore continually trying and taking forever and not, giving any feedback to the user. So I think if we limit it to those phase transitions, specifically in progress to whatever's next, and then the finalizing to complete, we could do the same for the waiting for plugin operations, but that doesn't really bother me as much because that's a controller that's a more standard Kubernetes controller that re-reconciles and keeps re-reconciling, on a schedule until the backup or restore is done. So I think retrying there wouldn't really gain us anything. But it wouldn't hurt to have it. I just think that would, it wouldn't really be any benefit. I think the PR that Tiger has right now handles those cases for the controllers that won't retry. If we want to add that for some of the other transitions, that would be fine. But we just need to be careful that we're not putting code in place that when API server is in a bad state that's not going to recover from, that it keeps a restore or backup in progress potentially for days at a time, because we keep retrying and retrying and retrying for every item in the restore, for example.
Maybe we could make it configurable.
Well, I don't know the configuration because a user's not going to say, "Oh, I'm planning on having my API server down permanently, so I'm going to configure for this to work for that." This is handling cases. I think in the restore case, though, we just fail the item and move on. I think that's fine because we logged that as a restore error. It's the transitions where we won't recover from that's the problem.
Yeah. My
But
point is, what's the impact if you do not retry at all? I just quite,
Yeah. Well,
I'm
the
just not
impact
quite
is that we
convinced.
right with the current code, like with current Velero code base, we have the update call, the client update. It fails, so I think we log an error that couldn't update Velero restore, and then we exit the reconcile, which means that restore will be in the in progress state forever. Although Velero is no longer actually working on it, so it's no longer in progress, but the CR says it's in progress, and so the user thinks it's in progress. Because we can't update that from in progress unless we retry for at least some period of time, because the attempt to update
But
that
I
from in
think
progress
for the,
failed.
yeah, I'll double check the code, but what if we change to the logic that in next cycle it fails the restore?
What's that? If
I mean, if it's stuck in the in progress, I think it has some mechanism to check the CR periodically, and then in the next cycle, if we see a in progress restore in the beginning of a reconcile of the CR,
yeah, I mean
the
that
controller can fail the
happens.
restore.
That happens right now when you start the server. So I mean, you could bounce the Velero pod and that would happen.
Yeah.
But the problem is
Yeah.
the way we reconcile those. We reconcile on updates. So there's a change to a backup, so we reconcile that. But because we didn't change the backup because the API server failed, so there's not going to be a reconcile triggered. I suppose you could requeue it, and then you could just
Yeah,
automatically fail
correct.
it.
Yeah.
Although I don't know that that's necessarily better, because in that case, then you actually are failing it even if everything succeeded. But I think you have to requeue it for that to work, because actually, if you requeued it, the existing code might. I'm trying to think, because I know we have that startup code that if it finds an in progress backup, it fails it. I don't know if requeuing it would cause that to do the same. It might.
Yeah, because you retry. I didn't check the code, but you retry conditionally, and I mean after several retries, I assume we give up, right?
Yeah. That's right now it's configured to retry for around 2 minutes, I think. And after the certain number of tries where there's a backup, or you do it 1 second later and then 3 seconds later, it's some kind of back off kind of where each one's a little further.
So
And then after 2 minutes, if it's still failing, then we bail just like now.
yeah, so then for some customers, the resource will be stuck at in progress, even after we add the retry. So
That's true. This PR is only going to solve it if it's a temporary problem. It's not going to solve it if it's a more permanent problem. And I'm trying to think, in that case of the more permanent problem, though, if you requeue when it fails, then when the when the reconciler runs it again, it sees that it's in progress, so it moves it to fail. That's also, again, that's going to fail if it's in the same. Again, I think there's two cases that we have to think about. There's the temporary problems that we're actually going to fix with this, but there's also making sure that we're not going to make it worse in those situations where the API server is not behaving well and it doesn't fix itself, and it's going to be that way for a long time. And so we need to make sure that somehow Velero is not, constantly churning and trying to hammer the API server. This retry would just basically give it, a small, I think it's like 6 or 7 total attempts with the back off. So it wouldn't be, causing massive load. The requeuing we'd have to be careful about, because again, especially if you tried to fail it and requeued it, and then it tried to fail it, you could end up in this kind of requeue loop if we didn't back off there.
yeah, so the question is, like, when we add this retry logic, like how much does it improve in customers' environment? I'm still not quite sure why, in this particular customer, why it happens so regularly.
It's because the actual cert process where they're updating the tokens takes a couple of minutes in their cluster. So they hit this relatively regularly, and a back off, a retry with a back off, of around 2 minutes would solve the problem for them. They now will have reliable backups and restores, whereas right now they're having to, manually bounce the server because things get stuck in progress, and then they have to rerun it again. And so
just to throw some flavor on it, it's not a typical Kubernetes deployment that's serving applications publicly or privately for a corporation. It is not in that realm. There are thousands of these deployments where the certs are getting regularly reloaded for their whatever security purposes. They're hitting it often, and it's a very high priority bug.
Yeah, if this is a routine thing, I mean the rolling out of the IPv server, and it is general across lots of users, I think this problem is more critical, and I think that will be a systematic problem. And only so the current update at the finalizing phase is not enough. Here I make an example for the data mover. So the completion of the async operation rely on the completion of the data upload or data download, the CR. And so the data mover will update the data download and data upload CR at the due time. But if that update fails for the same reason, we still get the same problem, even though we fix the current make the current PR to fix the problem. So that is only one example, and I think there is some more problems we need to discover under this circumstance.
Yeah. The concern is that Velero is not designed, to be robust, to work very well against like the flaky API server. Yeah, I'm still not quite sure. Like, have you ever tried to talk to the customer about their process, like making the API server unstable, so that they like, it seems like they introduce some process and making their API server unusable regularly, which causing problem in Velero. So then
I would imagine the only thing they could do here would be if their process, if they could somehow integrate the cert rollout with basically shutting down Velero, do the rollout and then start up again. I think with the current Velero code, the only way they could resolve this would be to literally shut down Velero every time they roll out. I don't know, but I don't know if they have control over that. I don't know if Wes, you have any idea.
Yeah, actually, even user shutdown Velero is not a good option because maybe at the time we have thousands of backups, and we have backup very large data, and it's reaching the end, and we have done that for a couple of hours, and it's not reasonable to shut down Velero at that time, right?
Well, and so in that case, we would need to do something, because what I'm saying is shutting down Velero would be preferable to having backups stuck in phases that aren't accurate, that ever recovers from.
But after Velero restarts, every backup will fail, because Velero will
anyone that was in progress, which right now would just be the one. But yeah, no, I'm not saying that's an ideal thing. I'm just saying that with the current Velero code, in 1.14, their only option really would be to shut it down, because otherwise that's the only way to avoid, if you have a 2-minute window with the API server is going to be down, preventing backups or restores from being in this permanent state of an invalid phase.
Yeah, but then if the third rotation is not happening when patching the CR, the backup will also fail, unnecessarily. I'm still thinking, is there any possibility to revisit their process? I don't think Velero is the only deployment that is impacted in their scenario.
I think this might be part of an upgrade process. It is part of a major telco rollout. I think what we're proposing here is not extremely controversial, in that if the API is not available for a limited amount of time, there is a retry with a standard back off mechanism.
Yeah, I think so here are two questions in my mind. First of all,
Sure.
Is this as everyone is questioning, is this a normal process to make the APS server down every day or routinely? Because APS server Velero or many other components are rely on APS server very heavily. That is the first question. So if the first question is true, and we need to solve the problem systematically, and we need to visit and discover more of these places that we need to make sure the update, make sure the retry, and not only fix the present one. I think to solve this kind of problem, the current approach in the PR is the right approach, but I think that is not enough. Just take the example I just mentioned. It's not enough.
Yeah. The backup and restore may be problematic in many different ways if they continue with this process, right?
Well, that very well may be the case. I'm not saying that there aren't other bugs lurking, because that, you know, it's always going to be the
I'm not.
case.
I think that's
But
Velero's bug. That's just the case that Velero didn't handle very well, and Velero is not designed to handle this case.
that doesn't mean we can't improve. In this case, I think the only
But that's a very limited improvement, I think. Just in very particular case, in a very small issue.
Velero is being used as part of the rollout of this. It's a single node cluster. The certs are being refreshed as part of each patch update. Each time they update these single nodes. They're very small, limited scope, and there's thousands and thousands of them. They're in use right now. This is rolled out, and this is one of their high priority bugs for us to fix. So this isn't a new process, right? It is currently out there, and this is what they came back to. If there are other bugs lurking, I think we'll find out about it pretty quick, but thus far, they have not reported anything else.
Yeah, and apparently this particular user, they're not using Data Mover in this environment, which is why the data upload, data download similar bug hasn't come to them. But if there's another user with a similar scenario,
but the same user,
well I mean,
but the same user may hit like a backup failure, restore failure, right? They just solve the problem when they are rotating the cert and the Velero is patching the CR. But if Velero doing other works,
that's true. I mean, the obvious example is on a restore. If this rollout happens in the middle of a restore, then several of their objects are going to fail. But that's not as severe a failure as this, because they'll get a failed restore. They'll see a list of failures, and they have the option to retry the restore. So we could attempt to solve it there. We just have to be very careful in the restore case, and because there's a potentially unlimited number of API server calls. So
so comparing to this, I think another option is if Velero failed to patch the CR from in progress to failure, we somehow requeue the CR and fail it, rather than trying retry, because I don't think retry it just solves a very small problem for this very particular customer. It's just not universal enough, in my opinion.
Let me just let me just bring up some other ideas. We know there's some saying about the backup window, right? So I think for the current problem, you should not set that time for the backup window. Or if they say, I will update my APS server at the 12 at midnight. So we will set the backup window, for example, 1 o'clock at midnight, and to the next 8 o'clock.
This is not a typical backup and restore. Like what we're talking about now, I think is irrelevant to the customer use case. I am happy to go get the details of the process so I can answer some of these questions. However, I will say this is an extremely high priority, very large customer. So a little bit of wiggle room and discretion would be appreciated.
But if the very high priority customer, what version of Velero do you plan to let them use? Because we do have this release overhead. Are we going to have this in version 1.15, which is targeting several months later?
Are we saying this is a new design? I don't think we are. I think we're saying this is a patch.
Yeah, well, I would say in general, I mean,
So do you want
let's
this in
step,
a release patch, or what version do you want this
well,
patch
let's
in?
step back a second. Let's say anything
Yeah.
new first goes to main. So, you know, at a minimum, that means it's going to, for the sake of argument, we approve the PR and we say, okay, next week or two, we merge it. That's on main. Okay, that guarantees it makes it into 1.15. As with anything, when we start talking about scoping 1.14.1, for example, we say, hey, is this an appropriate fix for 1.14.1? Does it have any API changes? Are there any CRD changes? This fixes a bug. It doesn't change the API. Depending on how we implement this, and that's where I think we want to be careful not to introduce too much, because I'd like to say we can build this in such a way that it would be appropriate for backport.
Yeah. I think the point is that this does not solve a very universal problem, right? It's just a very particular problem for a very particular customer. What if we first, if the customer do not want to make change to their process, so then what if we, somehow make the restore fail in a way, rather than retry, because retry, we just retry several times. So for this particular customer, the API server, it's unavailable for 1 or 2 minutes. It's good enough for them. But there's another customer which
If you would
API
like to
fail
make that
regularly.
proposal, if you would like to make that proposal in the PR, that
Yeah.
is totally the right thing to do.
Okay. Yeah, we can continue the discussion. I think my concern is that, just adding retry for the failure for the very particular customer, it just not very,
It
know.
is specifically what they requested after analyzing some of the other code and how it's being handled in their particular environment.
Okay. So then we can continue discussing in this PR and make decision later. Yeah, but yeah, I just want to clarify.
I would only ask that yeah, landing it in main would be great and easy. There is no design here required as far as we can tell. And that ideally we would like to get it in 1.14.1.
And the answer may be that the requeue and fail may be the first thing we do, and then maybe in 1.15 we come back to this and say, hey, we could do a better thing here that might require a little more design. Again, not knowing the specifics, I haven't talked to the customer myself, but I imagine even failing the backup or restore would be preferable to being stuck in this weird state. So that might move in the direction that makes it better. But I also suspect that that's not going to completely satisfy them when it looks to me like some amount of retrying might allow the thing to succeed. But again, that's a separate question. I will say that even failing the backup is an improvement over having a backup stuck in an invalid state forever.
Yeah, and yes, I think it's meaningful to track this or to analyze this kind of problem from end to end, and I think there are more problem we can a similar problem we can see around the whole process of Velero. Because I just curious as a question, I'm just curious is that why the update always fail at the async operation. but not fail at the other CRs like data upload and
Oh,
download.
I don't think it always fails at any particular point. I think this is just an example of where they're seeing it failing.
Yeah.
I can say that, as far as I know, the reason we don't see this as data upload is because they're not using data mover. So you know, they're
Okay.
mostly using this for Kubernetes resources.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do believe also they're seeing it right now more on restores than backups, and so they're actually seeing it in the restore controller because they're on Velero 112, which doesn't have the restore finalize controller. But basically, looking at the code, the restore and backups both are susceptible to this exact same problem, both going from in progress to finalizing and going from finalizing to complete. And to your point, Data Mover probably has similar concerns. So if there's anybody using Data Mover in a similar environment, they could hit that as well. So again, depending on whether we want to take the fail it approach versus the retry approach, we probably would want to consider, you know, Data Mover cases as well.
Yeah, besides retry mechanism we are talking about here, maybe we can think further about we set some we integrate better with the backup window or restore window that we prevent without doing anything
I
from.
think that's a major problem. I think they need to somehow make the process more controllable. Yeah, but that's,
I mean,
yeah,
even if we say we want to do that, I still think we need to do it at a minimum, fail the backup, because I think Velero leaving backups in an invalid state forever is not acceptable. I think at a minimum we have to, you know, requeue and fail, because otherwise it just becomes quickly, you know, in a bad situation when you look at the list of backup CRs and you see, hey, I have 3 in progress. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's just not about
I
listing
I
the
agree.
backups, right? There is a solution, let's say, working around Velero, and you have the other parts, the peripheral parts of this solution depend on the status of the CRs, right? Then if there are 7 steps and Velero is the 4th step, and you are stuck on 4th step because the status is not changing or the status is false, right? So in that case, in those cases, the solution is stuck because the status was not updated appropriately.
Yes.
And the status update was failed because of something which was not related to this solution, like API server was down, but it was recoverable, so something like that. So it might be the case that all the parts are not connected to each other, but they are affecting them. So that's why
Yeah, but then how you guarantee that will recover in 1 or 2 minutes? It
we
just
don't
works
we try to
people
make it
don't know.
robust. We try to make it robust. We don't guarantee, right?
Well,
That's
it's
the
true.
point.
Yeah, but robot
And
it doesn't.
the customer's
Yeah.
reviewing the timeouts at this time, and I think it's acceptable to that.
Yeah, but it may well be, even if we do put the retry solution in place, we still, you know, there's still the question of, okay, the 2 minutes has passed and we still haven't succeeded. Now what do we do? That may be
Yeah.
the time that you really want to do that requeue and fail. You know, just because again, otherwise, if you're out for 4 minutes, then you still have a situation where you have a CR that's, you know, never going to recover.
Yeah, maybe the solution is requeue with retry.
Well, the thing is that when we requeue, because the backup and restore controllers aren't designed for rerunning anything, if you requeue, your only option is to fail.
Yeah.
If you requeue an in progress backup, the only thing we can do at that point is fail it.
Or we could emit an temporary status backup event failed, something like that.
Yeah, the
Like
things like
custom event.
But
yeah, the things like we need to make a Velero more smart or more sophisticated. We don't want to deliver users lots of options to tell you that you set this and right.
I think from a long-term point of view, we've said for years, what we really need to do is redesign backup and restore workflow so that they can be resumed. And that once we do that, goes a long way to helping this situation. But we're a long way from implementing that right now. That's a big long-term.
Yeah. How about this? Currently, I don't think it's just, we don't need this for sure. And I think for one thing we can continue to discover the retry mechanism. For the other,
Right.
we
Yeah.
can we will seek for some systematic solution for these scenarios, and maybe we need to assign some people to work on this and make a systematic solution. How about this?
But again, I think Velero design as a, somehow this backup and restore as part of this platform, so then I think we can discuss offline, but I don't think, given how Velero is designed, it can handle this case very well. So if
Yeah,
we need to make decisions regarding design, recure or retry, I think I'm open for a discussion for recure versus retry. I'm just thinking current solution only works for a particular customer in a particular case, and for such kind of solution, I'm a little doubtful, like, should they go into the upstream or not? In my personal opinion, I think requeue is more universal because it doesn't require API server to be available, in a short period of time, but eventually it somehow reflects the problem instead of stuck in progress. So at this moment, I think requeue is slightly better, but I'm open to discussion, more discussion offline, rather than make decision right now for this year.
Yeah, if we want to do something more, yes, I agree that we need to redesign something over there. So we can continue the discussion around these two topics. Is that okay? Or we want to discuss something more?
I think that's fine with me. Thank you, guys.
Okay, then let's continue discussion offline and or in the following meeting. That's all. Okay. The next thing is about the discussion topics. So Daniel, please.
Yeah. So starting yesterday, could you click on that issue? I think we are seeing some a problem in the DCO GitHub Action app. And yeah, the DCO check will be states as expected, which it blocks the PR of Velero being merged. So the question is, do we want to work around it for all the PRs or just for the important PRs? Could you scroll down? I just want to check if it's fixed or.
There was a comment a little bit up from where I think that.
Yeah, there's some workaround like disabling the app, but introduce other GitHub action for
Yeah,
the
wasn't sure what the last
DCO
comment
tab.
was because we scrolled past it. These are just a bunch of issues that reference it. We scroll up a little bit, we can see the last comment.
Scroll up, please.
Let's go out.
Yeah.
Oh no, that was just someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there's no resolution here.
So are we okay to hold PRs for a few days and just add exception for certain PRs? I remember that PR, fixing issue in RC1. I just update the setting to make the DCO checking, not required. Then quickly just flip it back.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for anything that's in the way of getting 114 out, we need to just somehow disable it or something. I mean, we obviously we need to. I think until 114 is released, I think we're okay holding other PRs. I don't know if anyone else has an opinion on that, but that's kind of the focus right now anyway. Is the PRs that we need for 114.
Yeah, okay. So we'll apply the similar approach for the ongoing for 114 targeting PRs, at least in this week. If it's continuing next week, we're gonna apply some workaround to introduce other GitHub actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other one, right?
Yeah, that one is a PR by Tiger, so I just think it would be better to make some update to the documentation also. So are you going to make the change, Tiger? If not, I think we can also merge this PR because somehow that's mentioned in the Wikipedia page, referenced by the doc.
I could make the change if you guys want. I just followed the issue. The issue said to update this config, and it looked like it's backward compatible. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to make the change or not?
Sure. I can try add something there.
Okay.
Yep. The Velero.io, right? The docs.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Anything else we want to discuss here? Okay, then I think we can complete the meeting here today. Thanks for joining.
Sorry, let me double check. So we are okay for the RC2, right? I mean, no blocking issue we
Yeah, that's right.
found.
Yeah. Any of the issues that we found on the Red Hat side. So the first issue we found was completely on our OpenShift plugin, no impact to Velero whatsoever. The second issue we're still investigating, but it won't be a locking issue. And then there's a small one, a minor one we noticed today relating to error messages, which again, it's not. We created a GitHub issue for it, but it's not a blocker that can be handled in 115.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, no blockers from our side.
Okay, thank you. So then we're gonna tag RC2 like today or tomorrow, and keep you guys updated. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for joining the meeting. See you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.